As I mentioned, my name is Starendal, and I'm here to talk about how to lead and what that means, and hopefully give you maybe a few practical takeaways for how to view leadership in your organization or where you work or in your own role. And the topic for today will be three things. One is to try and define that. What does that even mean? I heard it so many times. It feels like it means sort of like good. Good, you can say good camera, bad camera, leadership camera. Is that better than a non-leadership camera? Feels like one of those words that had stopped having a meaning. So let's define it first so we agree on what we're talking about. And then I want to dive into thinking about how to lead specifically when things are hard. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's stuff going on in the business world and in the global sector and in the public sector. Globalization is both expanding and retreating at the same time. New technology emerges faster than our purchasing department can handle it. And the ubiquity of information and the internet makes things easier, but also harder. So this means also that in an operational environment, it's harder to plan 5 years in advance. Common joke. When have you scheduled work to handle the next pandemic? When in your annual schedule? Like, we can't. That's just going to appear. Or if you're a government agency, so what new EU regulation regarding sustainability do you need to adapt to during the coming years? Then you go, we don't know, Carl. We just know it will hit hard and it will hit fast. So we need to be able to shift with that. So the business environment is much more complex, and it's becoming increasingly more complex. And for that, thinking about how to lead in the future, where this is not a phase, this will go on for a while. Things are probably going to get harder before they get easier. Means that we need to mobilize the brain power in the organization. We need to mobilize the talent to solve the problems at hand. So reference how to lead specifically in a context where it's hard to plan everything 5 years in advance, where work might not be super repetitive, like in a startup or in a technology company or in a company, in an organization that works in a sector that has a high rate of change, which I would say even covers a government agency today. And then I'll hopefully leave you with a few tips. So let's throw you into the deep end. I know you have food in your mouth, but I'm going to force you to talk. So what is that? The red thing. What is it? Färja. It's a specific färja. Where does it go? Finlandsfärja. So what's a Finlandsfärja then? What's so special about it? Full of people, but it's a party boat. It's like, for the people who are not acquainted, it's a floating casino that goes back and forth between Stockholm and Helsingfors. And it takes about 24 hours, that cruise, and it sort of never ends. You just go back and forth if you want to. And as we Swedes say, what happens on that boat stays on the boat. So Las Vegas rules apply, definitely. So it's a party boat back and forth between Sweden and Finland. And there's a question for you. Who, and maybe that implies a name or a role or something like that, is a leader on the boat? So take 4 minutes, 5 minutes with your table. Come up with 1 or 2 suggestions. Who is a leader? And I'm not even going to define the word. Just try it out. With your table, how would you answer that question?
Kan inte ledaren vifta från situation till situation? I den här situationen
Välvalda ord, ja. Väldigt specifikt. Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. You had a few minutes to discuss, and I heard a few answers floating around. So give me an example from any table. Who wants to start? Who is a leader on the boat?
First, it just was a bartender.
Yes. Bartender. So bartender serves drinks, right, in the bar in the evening. So how would you reason he or she is a leader?
It's a situational leader where during the party hours, this person will, allow or not allow people to continue their party. And
True, she actually regulates the supply of alcohol. So a good bartender might even go, the mood is a bit low, like turn up the volume a little bit, go like, let's change the music, have a sense for the human sort of emotions in there, right? So managing the dance floor a little bit and the mood at the bar.
well, there's many leaders on a boat, and we came to the conclusion it's kind of situational. If there's an emergency, it's the people guiding the emergency.
Oh, so if the boat starts sinking, which happens unfortunately, someone who is not a captain might say, okay, I'm gonna start hoisting down the lifeboats, right? Meaning that in that moment they affect other people's behavior, thus becoming someone who shows, let's get the boats in, it's important, a leader, right? So it could be even a passenger.
Yeah.
Any other people roles on the boat that might be a leader? Any other table? From you? Anything?
I mean, we were talking about the DJ, of course, but
Yeah, sort of similar. Yeah.
with the music, turning up energy.
That's one.
We had a conversation about the serving staff for the buffet because you want to control the people and not getting angry with too little food on the buffet table.
So they might react to, if there's a huge queue, they might react and try to channel how people move and so on, thus shaping others' behaviors. Thank you.
Creating an uncomfortable situation.
Food is blocked, very uncomfortable.
And I guess also the direction of the boat too, because I mean the boat can go to Finland, but it could go somewhere else.
Yeah, there's probably...
So there's someone who needs to head off and lead that direction of the boat.
navigator or captain, maybe something like that, who is a captain, she is literally also legally responsible for the boat. So if something happens on the boat, it's your jail time. So literally that person would also probably lead how the boat should go towards Finland, right? And if it turns, goes to Germany, go wrong direction, please shift the boat so it points to Finland, right? That's an important leadership job. So there's plenty of roles here. I mean, there's humans all over that influence each other. That's the leadership part. And also, I could even argue, if I twist the word on a little bit, that maybe I could argue that the boat's architect is someone who is a leader here. Because that person, at some point in time, took design decisions around the shape of the keel. Meaning that if there's rough seas, the boat will move in different ways depending on those decisions. So if you go up into the steering room and the captain is super stressed during a storm, it might not be because she's an Aquarius. It might just be because the designer took some design decisions 2 years ago, which are now impacting those behaviors. We would argue that leaders here are all these people, not only the formal roles in the boat. So it's a pretty broad concept. And it's been studied by our academics over the centuries, especially the last sort of 50, 60 years. From sort of the turn of the century up until now, this has been studied. Over here, it's mainly understood as more like if you go back a few hundred years, sort of you have to have the right last name if you're going to lead. Otherwise, you won't be allowed. Kings, priests, people in the military, and so on. And 400 years ago, most people on this planet worked and lived in small agricultural communities with a few handful of people interacting. So leadership at scale, seeing the bigger organizational side of it, is mainly the last few decades, last 100 years. And if you look from a science standpoint, which is the thing we're going to talk about today, not fluffy stuff, here, the last sort of 30 years, 50 years, that's where the majority of the studies have been done. And I'm talking, here's a few, here's tens of thousands of high-quality studies all across the globe trying to study the phenomenon, why do people behave on the boat? Who is leading who does what, why? And this is, you'll hear stuff like servant leadership, transformational leadership, all of that. It's basically in that circle. And if you want to summarize all of that into something very tangible, the phenomenon, I would argue, is best understood in that circle as this guy's statement. This is a guy called Stanley, and he's really good at leading. He led he's one of the special forces generals in the US, and he led the surge in Iraq trying to take down the Al-Qaeda network, which was almost impossible, like a 10,000-headed hydra that outmaneuvered all of the American military might. He and his team came in and led the whole resurgence and the change of that. Really talented leader, and there's been a lot written about the work he did specifically there and in other contexts. And he would describe it very simply as relationships in a context that provide meaning. Very, very simple stuff. We need a shared context. The word leadership becomes meaningless unless we're part of the same family, the same boat, the same organization that is trying to do something. If we just meet on the road and go like, huh, the word leadership becomes moot. But if there's a shared context and someone in there is trying to give meaning to what's happening, you would argue now someone is in there leading. Music goes up because it's stale on the dance floor. Someone is trying to, we're here to have fun. Remember? Or let the beer flow, we're here to have fun. That's an act of leadership. And he also puts the lens on the relationship. And that's the majority of the studies the last 30 years are focused on that, saying it's not only you, it's the interaction with her or him and their reaction back. That's the leadership part. Imagine us working in a pet shop here in Stockholm, all of us. And I'm just a lonely employee, just like you are. And we've been working together for a long while. And one day I walk in and I go like, hamsters. It's gonna be huge. Like, we should put the hamster cages next to the door. And you all go like, okay. Well, I'm trying to lead here. I'm not a manager. I'm just saying like, there's a hamster festival this weekend, so it's gonna be huge. If we put the cages next to the door, we'll sell more. I'm leading now. Shared context, hamster store. Why is this relevant to you? Well, because of the festival. Creating meaning for you and trying to shift you forward. That is the act of leadership. And remember, the quality and the nature of our relationship will also shape how this plays out. Imagine that I'm that guy that has an idea every week, every day. And you've heard this speech multiple times before with different species of animals. So if I walk in now, hamsters, you go, yeah, good one. Like, And I'm gonna react to that. I'm like, another suggestion down the drain. But imagine instead that I've been quite helpful in the store and you respect me, even though I'm not the manager, and I go in, hamster time? And you go, Carl is saying something about hamsters, you should listen, because we like Carl. He usually helps out with the coffee, right? So the quality and the nature of the relationship is part of how we understand leadership. Shared context, focus on the relationship, and the meaning-making activity. And one of the bigger dichotomies that you need to separate also, there's two. The first is the concept of the leader versus the context. If you go back, as I mentioned, most people would understand it, most studies would understand it as he or she, often a he if you go back in history, has that last name or the blue blood or has that specific properties that imbue him with good leadership. We've come to understand that at a very rudimentary understanding. We've also come to the conclusion that, hey, the context also matters, the shape of it. Who owns the pet store? Is it stressful to work there? What kind of mood is it in there? Is the ceiling low? All of these things also impact how that leadership plays out. So the dichotomy has often been that there's a cadre of people saying, well, it's all the context, environment. Like, ignore if he's an Aquarius or a Capricorn, that doesn't matter. And you have the other part that says like, oh, I mean, the personality, like he's one of those kinds of people that gets hamsters sold. He just has that property. Studies, this is actually something that's quite easy to study because you can do twin studies to separate genetics and environmental factors. And they show quite clearly that what we already know, of course, it's both. This is from the Swedish studies done at the Defense Academy. And their conclusion is basically that in both the environment and the people, the properties of the people matter. There's a sort of a 60-40 slant towards environmental factors probably being more important to understand if leadership is effective or not. But it's very hard to define exactly. But both are there. So both the socio-cultural context and the people involved matter. And then finally, the other thing that often gets confused, the word manager, or chef in Swedish, and the word leader. Very hard to separate for some people. Can you be a leader? Well, only the captain, he's the leader of the boat, because he has the role of the captain, right? Well, as you pointed out, too simplistic. What about the DJ? What about the bar woman, and so on? So a role, remember, this word, I think the English word manager is much better than chef in Swedish. Because manager implies, very simply, it's a role attached to a specific organization. So that role doesn't exist outside of that environment. If you're a department manager at the work, you're not that at home. Then you're just Peter or Anna. And the role in the organization is put in place to manage something. A budget, people, responsibility, targets, I don't know. So it's basically a regulator. You regulate something, you're responsible for that. Just like the captain, legally responsible for the lives on the boat. But that doesn't mean that that captain is a leader. The leadership part is the other stuff. It's the, do we want to? Can we? Do we understand why? Do we want to be on this boat? Is it fun? Do we know where we're going? Do we care? It's the human system. So here's the most common pitfall. I see a lot of managers that do the management part, that regulate and steer and control as we should do. It's necessary. But they forget that there's a huge potential to do that part also. Imagine that you're the manager of the door. Oh, there. It could be someone at Pareto might be the door manager for the events, which means that you have to regulate the door closing and opening of the door. You could do that perfectly. But you could also do the leadership part, which is open the door and go, it's starting in 5 minutes. It's really good. You should be in here. Now you're both managing the door, but you're also leading the people who are entering and exit the door. Same as a captain on the boat. Yes, it's going to Finland and back, but does the crew and the people on the boat care about that? Do they want to go there? That's a huge force multiplier. So, together with the person next to you, so groups of 2 or 3, think about where you are. In your daily work this week, have you been manager or have you been a leader? Where's your focus been? Because you tend to slip and slide a little bit over time. I might be a super manager in my companies when it's always budget discussions like regulate, steer, function, and then sometimes, oh, new product launch, we need to get people engaged, like sliding into leadership. So talk to the person next to you. Where are you on the scale? The last week only, or this week, manager or leader? What have you been working with? Groups of 2 or 3, depending on how many you are. Nej, det är jättebra.
Och då folk som går på tyska och jo, men det är inte så. Och med löneökning, det finns dålig löneökning, men den plus det här.
Okay. Stop there. Short 3-minute discussion there. So a challenge for you then. In the last week, maybe not all of you are formal managers, but you might be, or some of you might be working as just leaders without having a formal management role. But where have you been last week? So hand is this, high up, like all management. Lower down, like, well, a little bit of both, or down here, it's just leadership. There's been very little of that stuff last week. So let's see your hand. High up means a lot of management. Lower down is a little bit more towards leadership. Where are you? Or in between. So, cool. So, the high up hands, anyone who want to share can take them down now. The high up hands, a lot of management. What you been working with the last week? What's been your work tasks?
So for me, for instance, I do a lot of planning because it's product cycle.
Yep.
So every 2 weeks we need to release mobile TVs, etc., web. Blah, blah. So it's a lot of planning, targeting, organization,
coordination,
and
like
planning. I do that a lot. So yes, that takes a lot of my time, the operation side.
Important work. It should be done properly. Anyone else high up with the arm? What's your last week? What's been your work?
Budget and KPIs.
Oh, targets, metrics, assessing that we're heading in the right direction. Again, important work that needs to happen. Anyone that's been lower down, there's a lot of leadership work, more on the other side. Anyone?
What do you mean? On the manager side? Or?
No, lower. Anyone who had the hand lower saying you did, my last week was mainly this. What were you doing?
Like building visions for the team on where to go on the sales and targeting, and also some development, like we're working with the IDPs now, individual development tracks.
Yep. Where we're going to go together. Does everyone understand where we're going? Is there input, discussions? Yeah, also important work. This actual graph came from the Swedish military was down in Bosnia in the 90s. It's the first time that where we had troops for 300 years, where Sweden had troops in almost combat-like situations. They were reloaded guns and people were at least pointing them at each other. I mean, it was a real war. And Sweden is a very peaceful nation, or the last 300 years has been very, very still at least. So it's been mainly, our entire military has been very, very focused on storage rooms and training. But what happened was that we sent United Nations troops, Swedish troops down there. And we actually concluded that we completed the mission, which was great. We did good work down there. But also when we came home, there was some after analysis done by the Swedish military, and there was it was not good. Sure, the targets were reached, but there was things stolen, people felt really bad. A lot of the experienced military people said, like, no more of that. Like, I'm never going on a UN mission again. You can forget about it. Like, it was horrible. And there was infighting, political infighting inside the military. And so they asked the Swedish Defense Academy to do some science on why did that happen? And they came back after a lot of studies and said, like, you have horrible dysfunctional leadership. Yes. And the military went like, no, we're the best at that. And like, no, let's look at the data again. No, it's actually broken. What happens basically is that you built a leadership and an organization around a stable state. There's not much change. And then you put it in a high pressure cooker, which is real armed combat, and then suddenly it just breaks. And one of the analysis they did was that this fractured. So there's a lot of leadership needed to complete the mission, but that ended up separated from the management part of it. So they said, like, this needs to happen. The managers in charge also need to lead. They can't just order, like, oh, troops should be there and storage should be there, regulate the function. There's also like, do we dare? Can we do it? Do we understand the mission? And then when that doesn't happen, that happens somewhere else. Then some local battalion commander goes like, okay, fuck the managers. Let's just get the mission done. And then the organization breaks. So they had to sort of...
Sorry.
Yep.
It also depends on the context.
Yes.
The timeline, which part of the year, etc.
Exactly. This tends to flux and go. But if it completely separates, or if one is done and the other isn't done, the system of the organization breaks. So a huge opportunity around this, which also is what led them to sort of start redefining how to lead under high change. Yes.
So is what you're saying that you more often fail on the leadership side than the managing side?
Both, I would argue. I've seen these we have. Most organizations have roles and people who manage things in their roles. And there's often a huge opportunity for those people to also embrace doing that work. But both can definitely fail. So what they did then was they did some new science on that and built out, and here's where I need your help, Jens and Matthias, with the roll-up. They built out this thing. This I'm going to show you is from the Swedish science done after the action. And this was all the scientists.
Yeah, we don't know how. Yeah.
They're experts, highly trained. They actually built out a system built on all the international studies around how to lead in their high change, try to define how. What does good look like? How do we actually do this? Because they came out saying, we apparently don't know what good looks like. We don't understand it. We don't know how to do it properly. And out came what they call the leadership model. And this is not done on military studies. This is mainly done on the studies outside in the public and private sector. But it fits perfectly for any context where there is change. And this is the thing I'm going to talk you through, because this has a few really interesting tidbits in it. And it's locally homegrown in Sweden, paid for with our tax money, and highly useful, actually. They're really highly trained, I promise. Yay.
We're not getting any leadership, so like self-leading.
Figuring it out as you go. Nice. It's stable.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. Sorta. So out came then after an action report, they said, like, can you please do some science on how to do it then? Because we apparently don't know exactly how it's done. And the team of scientists over at the Defense Academy here took the thing in the red bubble there and tried to sort of look through, okay, what works across all sectors? What can we learn from this? Is there a way to interpret that and put it in a useful sort of format? And out came the leadership model. It's the thing you have on the front here. And a very important thing about this is what we're going to talk now about is not what you think it is, not what to do. The problem is that we're going to shift into how others perceive what you do, which is the leadership part. So the perception of what you do becomes critical. I didn't have a hero slide for that, so I made one with myself, because there's no quotes. I quoted myself, sorry about that. I don't know how that works, but the other guy had a really cool one with a helmet in a helicopter. I didn't have that, so. Basically, what we're going to talk about is that your intent is nice, but the perception of your behavior is what we call leadership. Meaning that if you have that planning meeting and you're really stressed and you walk in and hand out orders and And after they go like, well, Carl, that was a little bit too fast. I'm like, no, I'm this super engaging leader. They go, no, you're an asshole. Unfortunately, according to science, their perception is the correct one. You might think you were perceived as inspirational and motivational with your get shit done, you grab that, but they're like, their interpretation. That is where the leadership happens. Anyone?
Shouldn't actually back what she said, but sometimes it can be biased because some people are very sexist,
Oh, yes.
right? So, so then it's perceived just because you are women.
The two people might perceive one behavior differently. That is correct. And if you want to lead effectively, the key thing is to shift into what's happening out there. Most people who lead, they're so up in their head that they don't see that, oh, maybe someone else would. I'm thinking this is really forward-looking, and they're like, it is not. Unfortunately, they're the receivers of the leadership, and that's where the leadership happens. So we need to shift into the reception of to understand. Anyone who ever played theater might know that as you are on the stage, you have the play and there's the drama and so on. But where does the actual drama happen? It's not on the stage. Where does drama happen in theater? In the heads of the people in the audience. And one person over here, she might interpret the thing on the stage like, oh, it's comedy. And one person over here might interpret it as, oh, this is so sad. And both are correct in their interpretation because it's their interpretation of the drama. Key thing when you lead is to try to shift into how does what I do land? Does that help us move forward or not? Rather than being up in your head all the time, which is really, really hard. So let's go through this stuff. Made by the Swedish Defense Academy, built on the international science. It's 10,000 sub-studies across hundreds of organizations, thousands of organizations across hundreds of countries, and condensed into something semi-useful, I would say. What you're seeing are two legs saying behavior comes from somewhere. Properties of the person, yes. Who you are matters. It has impact on how you behave. I was born in Sweden. I was raised in the countryside. That a little bit shapes me. I still feel anxious in a big city, I do. And that's just part of my personal sort of, that can change over time, but it's part of who I am. I react to stimuli a little bit depending on that. But I also have competencies which could be learned. How I react to stress, for example, definitely shaped by my upbringing. But I also learned stress coping skills as an adult. So they both intersect and sort of give me some skills. But the context in which things happen also matters. I don't know, you mentioned, you saw a few years ago, pandemic. Did you see that? Did you miss it? Oh, it was hard to miss, right? And during that year, the first year, like March 2020, like I felt a little bit stressed. Did you feel stressed? A little bit, like late March, I was turning on the TV, it's like, is the world ending? And then suddenly after you have to go to sprint planning, and you're like, hey everyone, like Carl, are you anxious today? Is it because of us? I'm like, no, it's because of the outside context. So yes, who we are and where we are matters both the organization and the surrounding context. But the meat and potatoes, looking at the interpretation of behaviors. So, 3 things that really correlate in these studies with results, and I mean organizational results. That's that axis there, is that stuff. When people perceive, and this is quite cross-cultural and it's quite cross-organizational, it's been replicated over and over again. When people in the given context perceive you as an authentic role model, that there is some notion of there's some values coming through of who you are. There's some notion of you being showing what the thing you're looking for, and that you also take accountability even for the hard times, not only for the good times. People respect that, and that creates results. And also, when they perceive the people that you're trying to lead, that you actually care a little bit. And you don't have to care an infinite amount. A little makes a huge difference. Names, where are we? And that matters. And also, the confrontational part about that. When there's a need to correct, because that happens, you're over budget. If that interaction is from the angle that the person who is corrected feels that you do it because you care about their world. Hey, Peter, I saw that you're about to hit your budget. I've been there myself, and let's figure this out together. That matters. That creates results. when they feel that there's a connection between the people leading and the people being led. And also, when they feel that you're promoting participation and creativity. We call it inspirational motivation. Why do we have a pet store? Why hamsters again? Tell me, can I get that? That's the motivational part. But also, hey, I have a suggestion then. Could we stack the cages like this, or could we do that? There's a sense of I can impart something on my work environment, that creates results. We call these developmental behaviors. And the key with this is not a type model. I am across this scale every week, a little bit there, a little bit that. If this needs effect, it's just a little bit more over time helps. Because if we go down the basement, this is actual Nordic science, this is really well done, where they've actually take a look at how does it look when it's really bad. And I mean bad. And specifically, are there nuances of bad? Different styles of bad? Most leadership science previously has been like, here's good, and that's good, and here's blue good. And it's like, oh, let's look at bad stuff. They come in two classes, apparently. The active destructive, as we call it. Then people perceive you to be arrogant, unfair, dishonest. That's the yelling sort of stuff. Anyone ever seen that in a work environment? Yeah, that happens. Let me tell you, maybe the manager in charge or the leader in charge feels that that's highly motivating. It is not. Short term, there might be a little bit fear bump, but after it just erodes. That's usually what we think about as destructive leadership. But there's another part that came out of the studies, the passive destructive, this part. The unclear, cowardly, laissez-faire, sort of non-assertive mush. This is really, really bad. And this is super scary because this is really hard to sort of grasp. I worked with a manager once who was super nice. I mean, nice. Like you wouldn't want to have a coffee with the guy. But the actions of him, because he was very much in charge. So what are we going to do with the safety routines? He's like, are we going to have more staff next week? You figure it out somehow. I need to go email. And what happened then was that there's no clarity around something, around a lot of things. And people start to turn inwards. You need to work harder. So the working groups would literally look for enemies within. It just became this, and I just literally wished that he would just yell at someone. Because then I could literally go, we need to talk about leadership. But then, now there's no real point to, nothing to grasp. So it actually shows that this correlates much more with bad results than, I'm not saying you should be mean, but what happens when you're just over assertive, aggressive, and so on, is that your employees will gang up on you, and in the fika room they'll say, all agree that you're an asshole. They don't agree on about other things maybe, but that they agree about. So this is just bad stuff. And the key thing is we end up here sometimes. I might be stressed in a planning meeting. I might be under pressure. So then I'm a little bit too forceful. And I'm thinking that this is inspirational, motivational, right? My intent, like just we need to get shit done. But they're like, oh, was that a over-demanding sort of assertive thingy? Like a bit, So we are over this scale. The key thing is trying to avoid this because it has a massive negative impact. And then you have the glue here, conventional. These behaviors, or the interpretation of these behaviors, come out as a necessary. Words like control, demand, and reward. They're part of an organization. Seek agreements around the work. Conventional approach. What targets should we have? Those KPIs. What's the sprint goal? Where are we? Those are not actually up here, but they're necessary. Those stand on that. The key thing is that if those turn into a carrot and stick, oh, so I'll just complete my sales quota and then I get my bonus, cool, I'll only do that then. Then they turn into an eroder. Same with taking appropriate action. That's me running into the server room when there's an incident, like we need to act now. If they perceive, the people in that server room perceive me as Carl is here trying to help, and we need to act together, it's like good stuff, but they might also flip it into over control. Oh, so it's him in charge again. That's Carl's agenda. When they perceive this as over control, when they perceive it as a carrot and stick, the results again, it just erodes the motivation to do work. they'll basically sit around and go like, okay, we'll sit here until Carl comes and tells us what to do next time. Here's the glue though. Yes?
How do you know the outcome of that after you're running into the survey?
That's the hard part. You need to ask them. They need to tell you. And that's the super hard part about being able to, where am I, what's happening here? I once thought I was up here, or like, yay, and because I helped one team change how they worked. It took sort of a year, very, very this stuff, super good. Everyone was in agreement, this is the best we've ever worked. And then I was asked to go to the other team and help them. And I was high on my own supply, to be honest. So I figured I got it nailed. I know what to do. So I just walked over. Let's do the same thing. Like, let's remove all the roles. Let's remove all the guardrails. And I trust you to do the work. And it was sort of a little bit off. It worked for a few weeks and sort of. And then after a while, two of the guys came to me and said, Carl, we think you mean well, they said. We think you do, but you're perceived as a bit scary. I was like, no, I'm this super engaging. Like, no. Actually, it feels like there's no control. We don't know what to do. And what I forgot was this. For 10 years, they've been micromanaged by the other manager. And he left, and they asked me to walk in. And I came in, and I had completely different behaviors. I removed way too much guardrail too fast. So they perceived me as, boom, passive destructive. And that was way off of my interpretation. My lucky star, though, they told me. Kind people, right? So I could adapt.
Was it?
No, sorry.
Would you agree though that laissez-faire type leadership, because I've seen that in a positive light as well. Here it's in a negative light, for sure, as passive. But I mean, you could also view it as sort of opposed to the micromanager. You know, more as a manager who sees themselves as an enabler and powering others,
Yes.
right?
That's exactly it. You're completely correct. But here we're talking about an academic definition. Means each word has a strict definition. And laissez-faire in this word doesn't mean inspirational, motivational, or anything. It means they need to know what to do with the security routines, and you just don't give a shit. And then that's not decentralized. That's not delegating. That is scary stuff. So as you say, the letting people move and take authority, that's that stuff. But when they perceive it as damaging, that's that stuff. So you need to know their perception. That's the hard part.
And hence adapt to each and every individual in terms of how you approach.
And that's the even harder part, exactly, because the same behavior might shift, and as I mentioned, two working groups, same company, they needed different things in a different context. The key thing is to shift into what they need, where they are. And over time, do more of that stuff. So I'm gonna try and do something here. We're gonna try, Jens, are you ready? Yeah. Ready? Define ready, right? Just give you a microphone. We're gonna try a small, simple role play. Well, I'm gonna call you. I'm the manager, so it's just don't. Yeah. Yep. Let's put it on. I'll do like this. Oh.
Jens, how does it feel to be on the other side of the microphone for once?
I don't know what to expect, so. Exactly.
So in this one, we have the leadership model on the front side. And then I've included exemplary behaviors from the actual studies, the science. So you flip up the side. So you see some examples of concrete sort of, how would it look if you lead by example? Well, that they feel that you act in accordance with expressed opinions, that they feel that you actually acknowledge your own mistakes without making excuses and so on. And that goes on to conventional behaviors and to even the bad stuff, the destructive behaviors. And I'm gonna do a small, very simple role play with Jens, employee, actual formal manager. And you're gonna try and use the model to sort of debug what's happening. Specifically looking for what behaviors am I using and how is Jens interpreting that. So there's a case here with a few questions on. So we're at the company Teknologi AB, and our turnover is increasing significantly, and technology develops at an ever-increasing pace, and tasks are becoming more complex. Jens here, He's worked diligently at this company for a while, many years actually, but he's not really keeping up. It's just this technology is shifting forward. And he has done some errors and it just keeps happening. And I'm the new manager in here and I feel that it is just, I had enough, to be honest. I'm not super happy with this. So I'm gonna call Jens to my office and discuss this. And look for our behavior and specifically think about Jens's interpretation. So, oh, Jens, hi. How are you doing?
I'm good.
You good? Yeah. So I saw the reports about those new manuals you put out. Just what's happening? There's errors all over the place, man.
Well, I mean, it's hard. Yeah, things are happening so fast. I mean,
I know. We're a technology company, yes, and there's been over a month now. There's been errors and errors. We've had this discussion before. And frankly, I just had enough. Either you shape up and you get in line with what everyone else here can handle, or I need to consider some other option. Are we clear?
okay.
Okay, cool. So don't make any more errors now, okay?
Right.
Okay, I think this meeting is concluded now.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh. Come here.
Okay.
So,
I'm back.
how does that feel? Great. Have you ever seen conversations like this in organizations? I've seen them. I've been on the receiving end, definitely. So it's basically there's been a problem, and I'm trying to correct the problem. That's what's happening. How did Jens feel about it? What's your thought out there?
Intimidated, maybe?
Not highly motivated? How did it feel?
Slightly intimidated.
Slightly intimidated? Yeah. So, are you more? You're not gonna do better work now, probably.
It's not like I know what to do now.
It's just
I
don't do bad stuff.
Yeah.
So how would Jens describe my behavior to the coworkers? What words would he use? Anything from the model?
Arrogant, unfair, overly demanding.
Arrogant, unfair, overly demanding. That's it. Destructive. We're down in the place where sure he'll work here, but his motivation is totally destroyed. And why am I doing this then? Any thoughts? Why am I acting as I do here? Is it because I'm an Aquarius? What's going on? Could be an environmental factor, right? Maybe I had a call with my manager 10 minutes ago that was similar, right? Said like, if you don't fix the quality KPI, we need to look for a new VP, okay? Like, huh. So it could be stress. Other factors?
Perhaps you don't care.
Don't care.
You just want to fill your quota.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe there could be like my view on people is I just don't trust people in general. So when people make mistakes, there might be that my upbringing, like, nah. But if I care or not, then shift the question to why don't I care? Well, maybe because the environment, the organization environment I'm in, the quotas are the only thing that matters, and then I get my salary.
Yeah, and you don't understand your context, you don't understand why you're doing it.
Exactly.
You just have a position to do something and you're getting
Yeah.
salary.
I'm just managing this quality KPI, and be on your way now. Yep.
Maybe this is the way you've been managed. I mean, by pressure, you are under high stress, and that's when you like push yourself, and that's why you're doing that to him instead of like you maybe haven't been helped before during your own struggles, and so you don't do that.
Exactly. We talk about chefskompetens in Swedish, managerial related competencies. Basically, have I been trained to handle such a situation? Maybe I've only been trained in this is how you do. Slap them and move on. Slap them and move on. No one ever told me like you could do it this way. Could be a competency problem. Okay, should we try it a different way?
Should I go?
Okay. So I'm going to try and do this instead. Let's see how that could work. So we get some closure on this. Okay. Oh, Jens, come on in. So, Jens, how is work?
To be honest, not that good.
Not that good?
No.
What's
no.
going on?
It's like things are just moving too fast. I mean, I can't keep up.
So I've seen that there's the last release of the manuals. There was some problems. Any thoughts? What's happening?
You know, there were this. I don't understand the specs, and I couldn't. You know, the tech was so. They updated this new release. I had missed a couple of things there.
I hear you. And probably there's a lot of work going on, and I know we're shifting into new technology. Is there anything we could do to give you support so that you can do better work next time, so that we don't have the errors? Anything we can do to help?
Can't suggest something. I mean, what could that be? I mean,
maybe you could work with Peter next time, because he's been doing the new manual system for a while. Maybe you can team up with him. Would that be okay?
Yeah, Peter's nice.
Well, give that a try. The key thing, though, is that I don't want you to get into a squeeze here. So really, we need to have manuals that are error-free, and we need to help out in creating that. Okay? Is that cool? And if you work with Peter?
All good. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jens.
Thank you.
Oh, applaud for Jens, the actor. How did that feel?
Oh, better. I like Peter. I mean, he's a great guy.
He's great.
Yeah.
What am I using now? Where am I from? How does he perceive me? What's your thought?
More inquisitive.
A little bit questions, definitely. Maybe there's a sense that I care a little bit about you.
Yeah.
Don't want him to get into trouble, actually. I want him to do great work.
You're solving the problems together. Like, it's not his problem, it's all your problem.
Yeah. So I'm trying to tip into taking accountability. So these problems, they're ours to fix. I'm not saying it's you. Problems are you, results are me. But then also that part. Where are you? What's happening? What do you need? I actually care a little bit here. That could definitely help. But then also, I'm trying to also do this part. We have agreements here. We can't have manuals with defects. Can we agree on that? And we're both like, yeah, that's probably bad. So how do we get there? What do you need to move forward? Now I'm shifting into more this conventional positive behaviors and more of the developmental behaviors that are the opportunity. And that hopefully, the thing that comes out in the studies is that what happens when you do more of that is that people actually want to do the work. They care more about for the work. I'm the DJ, so I want the dance floor to be fun. Not only I have my sales quota of beer and then I move on.
But in the end, you still came with a solution.
I did, which, very true, good spot.
Could you have given a little bit more chance for Jens to include?
I could actually. And one of the key sort of indicators that you're in the sort of conventional space is that you are the solution man or woman. So that's usually a small, I tend to have that as a warning when I work, like, am I the solution person or is he or are they? So this might be needed from time to time, but the thing is, as soon as you do that, you limit the potential space. So if you, as you say, could stay even more open, how do we solve this? Where do we move next? There's an even bigger opportunity.
Because next time he has a problem, he will come to you and expect you to solve it.
Exactly. But the whole also, if you look at the organization and leadership in general, unless there are clear agreements about some things, the organization falls apart. Yeah. Not even Apple has unlimited funding. So unless you have agreements on sort of how much do we spend on that, there might be cash flow problems which defaults the company. So at some level, agreements around the work are needed, but as you point out, maybe they're not needed in every context all over the place. So the key thing with this, available for you, it's free, it's made by Swedish tax money. The science is out there, the science team is here in Stockholm, they keep evolving the model and the science behind it. Plenty of good stuff written. They've even written one that summarizes all the science on destructive leadership. This is bad read, this is you need to take a shower after. This is not fun at all. And the books, the things they've written, remember, it's scientists doing it, so no fun reads. It's like Parmesan cheese. You need to read 4 pages and then, there's no stories, it's not like management literature with like all these stories and stuff. This is condensed real things. They're highly useful for debugging your work. I think of this as sort of the debug chart. Whenever I see that stuff, or I see myself doing it, or I find out, think about where do I act? It's driven by environmental factors. Is it the individual? Where are we? And then as a communication thing, I have one guy, senior manager that I've been part of training his organization to use this to talk about leadership. He did a town hall with his entire company, basically saying, okay, this is how we lead. This is the thought. This is at least the theory. And then one of the days he had to do one of those take appropriate action. So he runs into one of his middle managers a few months later and has to do a correction. There's something like the conversation I had with Jens. And his employee then looks at him and listens and goes, hey, just thinking out loud, is this one of those over-control things? He goes like, what? It's like, you had the town hall, you remember, and I feel actually a little bit like this is a little bit over-control. Like, could you let me solve this instead of you suggesting? And he goes like, oh, well, thank you. Of course, sorry, that was not my meaning, my intent. Like, I know, but as you said in the town hall, we're trying to not over-control here. So could we instead? And then immediately they've built in a language for how to talk about leadership. Because leadership otherwise becomes this fluffy quagmire of perceptions and ideas about it. Instead, like, here's the terminology we're going to use. Here's the things we're hoping to create. Please tell us if we step off the scale and have a conversation about why that's happening, so we can correct. So then it became for them basically a shared language for leadership, and that's how I tend to use it. Plenty of resources for you to use. A few finalizing tips here before we move over to the bigger part of the evening. If you look at the science, and I want to pick out a few things for you, then some things, unfortunately, in the studies, this stuff has much more power than that stuff. I know that's not how Hollywood movies say, but bad is stronger than good. So if you just dampen this a little bit and try to capture when that happens and self-correct, that actually has more effect in the studies than adding more of that stuff. I would wish the inverse to be true, but if you look at the studies, it's really clear that this erodes the motivation and the ability for the organization to collaborate when it happens so much that actually just stopping yourself a little bit earlier, even that has more effect. So actually, I think in the data it's 5-1. So if you do one yelling, you need to do 5 nice things. Not entirely correct, of course, but sort of. And then that individualized consideration, that has immense power. It just stands out in all the studies that when Jens here feels that I actually have this conversation not for my KPI, but for I don't want him to lose his job or get squeezed by his working group. Like, you're about to make a mistake. Let me help you. When they feel that that's what you're doing, they will start to snälltolka you. When you then come running with that incident, they won't interpret it as overcontrol. They're more likely be, it's Carl, and he actually cares a little bit. He knows my name, so it's probably important. So the individualized consideration, hey, in Swedish, we call it fika. Hey, we're here. Let's connect a little bit. That makes a huge difference. And then the seek agreement stuff, don't be afraid of that. During the low interest economy, the last 20 years, there's been a lot of focus on freedom at work and autonomy and so on. But that completely collapses if there's no agreements, no targets, or at least goals for the work. So don't be afraid to seek those agreements. There needs to be, where are we trying to go together? Are we in agreement on that? How much can we spend to go there? Without those guardrails, the developmental stuff doesn't really work. And then, the top one, as you said, I could have asked Jens, how do we solve this? And then zip it. That's my main problem when I lead, is that I always suggest what to do. I don't want to use my brain. I think it's fun, and I like solutions more than I like problems. But what I've learned the hard way is like, okay, here's the problem at hand. Does everyone understand the problem? Cool. Here's the constraints, and now I'm gonna uncomfortable silence. more uncomfortable silence. And then someone says like, we could do the test automation this way. I'm like, brilliant. I didn't even know we could do that. But if I had started priming everyone earlier by saying, it's probably a blue solution, right? I don't have no idea what I'm talking about. And people go, okay, blue then. So just keeping your mouth shut a little bit more and just asking, how do we solve this? That can move you forward. And then the accountability towards others. Yes, don't go down here. If there is problems, be accountable. It's super easy to be that nice guy that I told you about, where everything is just a slippery slide, or I don't know what. If you're the CEO, you're accountable. If you're the captain, there's a problem. There's a legal accountability. It's called ansvar in Swedish, and that's actually developmental behavior. When they perceive you taking ansvar, being accountable, that works. And the final one is, of course, just a regular tip to just check yourself. Where is my talk? Where's the perception of my actions? Any gap here erodes the accountability and the idea of you as a role model. So please don't say stuff you can't follow through on with other people. And you might think that they don't listen, but they do. So people keep tabs. And when there's a mismatch between the nice talk and the words, literally, boom, there you are. Immediately, that dishonesty erodes quicker than anything. So the say and do loop needs to close over and over again if you're going to be effective leading others. As I mentioned, there are books. This one is a good read. Read it carefully. It's, as I mentioned, it's basically the condensed science of thousands of studies. It's really, really dense. I think I've read it 10 times. I think I still find new stuff in it. Studies are great. I do run a lab sort of session like this regularly in Stockholm, where it's not only focused on this science, but in general, how to lead in high change. So that's one you could, there's a QR code for that in the handout. If you join there, I'll notify you when we get together. It's usually around 100 managers and leaders that are trying to lead differently, that are sharing and learning together. And we usually bring in scientists who share new ideas and topics. And if you're struggling to read the book, I'm actually running an online book circle in the book. So you could sign up for that. I found that to be really good, because then we might be around 20 leaders and managers that read it at home, like 2 chapters, and then we meet online and discuss, and also try to connect to our practical work. It's people from startups to government agencies and so on that do it together. And then I also teach the formal course in this from the Swedish Defense Academy. They have I just did this week, 4 days out in the archipelago with about 10 leaders and managers, a 4-day training course in this specific leadership. And that's created by the Swedish Defense. But it's not a military course, it's mainly for the private and public sector. So that's also available as support.
These studies, are they covering mainly big organizations or also smaller?
All kinds. It's the transformational leadership part, that's where this has roots. And I think you have the Globe study there, which was 52 countries with at least maybe 100 studies done in each country across all domains. So it's pretty broad, these brushes. Yes?
The last one you mentioned there, is it UGL?
This it's from the same. This is the same team who did the UGL. Anyone done UGL? Oh, you've done TOE also. Nice. So UGL is Swedish, and that's done by the same team that did the science. But UGL is from 2000, and the last version was made like 2008, and that's basically built on trying to understand more about the group and the people in it. Who am I there? The spin-off was basically thinking about how do we lead then, which UGL is not a course in being a leader, it's a course in being human with others. Kind of like TOE. It's self-knowledge, like who am I with others? Just opening up the aperture for understanding self. Super powerful stuff. But this is from the same team. It's their new stuff, basically. Born from... it's good stuff. I mean, UGL is like it's a get to know yourself properly through through the eyes of others. Like, who? Okay, so that's how I'm perceived. I wish someone told me earlier. So this is from a reputable institution in Sweden. They're literally sitting over there in Stockholm. And it's already paid for with your tax money, so use it, all right? And that's it for me tonight. Thank you so much.